Hello guys. The long-awaited video is now here. This is part 2 of What If Naruto Was Neglected and Was Uchiha. Sorry for the delays. If you have not, check out my other channel Shadow Kage, where there is a ton more fanfic and fanfic I think you guys will like. If you haven't, check out my Discord channel to recommend new fanfics and talk to me. Anyways, let's begin.
In the center of the village hidden in the leaves stood the Hokage's tower proudly in front of a mountain with the faces of 4 legendary shinobi were carved. The first face was the face of the Shodai Hokage, Hashirama Senju, who with the work of the clans in the area banded together during the time of the warring clans to create the village of hidden leaves. Key amongst these clans was the Uchiha clan and their most powerful member, Madara Uchiha. These two powerful shinobi were opposites in almost every facet of the word, but it was those differences that created an eternal rivalry that spread into the two clans. All of that tension came to a head in one final clash between Madara and Hashirama in a place now known as the Valley of the End, which cost the legendary Uchiha his life. Sometime after that battle which rocked the shinobi world down to its core, Hashirama chose his successor for the position of Hokage. Hashirama chose his brother Tobirama Senju to be his successor for the mantle of Hokage. Tobirama too had grown up with Hashirama and Madara in the warring clans period, and due to numerous conflicts and his own personality never was able to trust in Uchiha. It was this lack of trust that created many domestic problems between the Hidden Leaf and the Uchiha. In an effort to appease the Uchiha, Tobirama had founded a police force in Konoha and left it to the Uchiha in a way to keep their power in check. Tobirama met his end during the First Shinobi World War, where he sacrificed himself fighting Kyumo's Kinkaku force. On that team that Tobirama sacrificed himself to protect and entrust the future to was a young Hiruzen Sarutobi. Hiruzen was Tobirama's prized pupil and a ninja of extraordinary caliber. It was for these very reasons that Tobirama named Hiruzen the third Hokage just before his death. Under Hiruzen's watchful eye, the Hidden Leaf was guided through 2 more world wars, and its Hokage grew in fame with the village itself. As Hiruzen's skills continued to advance, he had become known as the God of Shinobi, a title that had not been used since Hashirama Senju's time. Hiruzen's teaching abilities were world-class. Hiruzen taught 3 powerful shinobi how to be shinobi, and these 3 were Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Orochimaru, who later became known as the Sannin for their exceptional skills. Taking the losses of the Third Shinobi World War onto his shoulders, Hiruzen decided to atone for that mistake by stepping down, much to the village advisor's disagreement. Hiruzen named Minato Namikaze, a pupil of his student Jiraiya, as the 4th Hokage due to his strong will of fire, a belief Hiruzen held in high regard. Minato had made his name in the war by eliminating scores of Iwagakure shinobi with just the Hiraishin and Rasengan. The effects of the Hiraishin earned the man the moniker of the Kiroi Senko, which was all the enemy saw before their life was no more. It was not only his power that earned him the title of Hokage, but also his infectious personality that drew people to his powerful presence. It was this man who was sitting in the seat of the Hokage behind a desk in his office with his eyes shut in a contemplative silence. Minato appeared to be a tall, fair-skinned man who did have bright, blue eyes and spiky, sunshine blonde hair. Minato had jaw-length bangs framing either side of his face. His daily attire consisted of a standard Konoha nin uniform with 2 thin bands each on both of his sleeves, a leaf green flak jacket, blue forehead protector, and blue sandals on his feet. He had also taken to wearing a long, white haori over his leaf uniform that had an orange flame pattern around the base of it. Minato was lost in thought, ignoring the ever-growing mountain of paperwork that was gathering upon his desk. It was the day that almost destroyed his entire family in a matter of moments. He learned in that day just what it meant to feel pain for something that was out of his control. All he could do was send out the village's best tracker units to search for him. He couldn't even ask other nations for help because of the implications it would have, not only on Konoha but Naruto. What was odd was that the sky didn't show any signs of darkness. In fact, it was a bright and sunny day, almost as if it was glad to illuminate what they saw. That was 5 years ago. Flashback. Minato and Kushina were left speechless at what they were just told, because if it was true, then it just turned their whole world on its axis. Minato was left to stare at his sensei, Jiraiya with a mix of disbelief and worry but just couldn't find his voice. Kushina on the other hand was livid, her hair was swaying like the Kyuubi's 9 tails. The reason was that her hair was resonating with the tremendous amount of anger welling up inside of her body. Can you repeat that, Jiraiya? I am not exactly sure I heard you correctly the first time. Jiraiya took a deep breath and with a serious face repeated himself, not quite believing what he was about to say either. I said that the prophecy has changed. It now says he with the vision shall recreate the world as he sees fit with either peace or chaos. It was only a few days ago that he was summoned to Mount Myobokuzen by the 2 Toad Elders. When he questioned them on why he was so suddenly taken away from his research, he was whacked over the head by both Fukasaku and Shima. After that they had taken him to the Grand Elder where he told them about the new prophecy. Sensei, you must be kidding. We did all we did because you assured us that either Naomi-chan or Narumi-chan was the child of prophecy. Now you are telling us it might be Naruto. Minato was slightly worried because he was aware of how little they interacted with their son, but they needed to make sure that Narumi or Naomi were prepared for what would be pushed on their young shoulders. Minato was also glad since this would give him time to spend with his eldest child, his son, and help him grow into a great shinobi but also a great man like the Naruto in Jiraiya's first novel. I am not joking with you, Minato. I believe that they are speaking of Naruto in the prophecy, so with that in mind, is Naruto here at the moment? Jiraiya asked the 2 parents, because if he was then they could start the training now. Now that Jiraiya thought about it, he didn't recall spending any time with his godson, and that actually bothered him. There was no way he was too indulged in the prophecy that he would ignore Naruto was there? If only he knew how wrong he was earlier in time instead of now a month after the 3 Namikaze's birthday, but it was far too late. Kushina was about to respond, but that was cut off when the door to the room they were in slammed open and an excited Naomi ran in, followed by a more calm Narumi. "Tu-chan, Ka-chan, can we start training today, pretty please?" Naomi all but begged her mother and father, ignoring the toad sage, causing him to mumble about disrespectful brats. Kushina looked to Minato, silently asking for an answer to the question posed to them. Minato nodded, since this would be a good way to train all of their children and he really wanted to see what Naruto was capable of. Yes, we will all be training together today since you will be starting the academy soon. We can't have those other clan's children get too far ahead, right? Will you be helping Jiraiya? Kushina asked, ignoring Naomi's excited shout of yes in favor of staring down the toad sage, telling him he better say yes or else. While Jiraiya struggled to manage a coherent response, Narumi raised an eyebrow at the fact that Kushina used the word all. Did that mean they were going to include her brother? She really hoped so, because the last time she heard her brother's name was when that man with the sword was talking at their birthday. Does that mean that Naruto-kun is going to train with us this time? Narumi tried to hide the hopeful tone in her voice, but she really wanted to spend time with her elder brother. She let a large smile cross her face when she saw both Kushina and Minato nod their heads yes. Naomi was ecstatic that she would get to train with her Nisan. For some reason, when she didn't see Naruto at the part, she wanted to train with him or at least talk to him. Anything she was about to say was cut off when there was a poof of smoke in Jiraiya's arms, revealing the toad contract. Well, let's go see Naruto so we can get down to business and start shaping you 3 into feared shinobi. Jiraiya exclaimed in a childish tone that got 3 giggles from the girls and a shake of the head from Minato, who had a fond smile on his face. The group of 5 each made their way to Naruto's door, with their own thoughts each revolving around Naruto and each being hopeful about the encounter upcoming. Making it there, Minato was about to open the door when his hand froze the moment he came to a realization. I don't ever remember coming in here before, that can't be a good thing. Pushing back his apprehension, Minato opened the door and the 5 people entered the room. The group simply stared at the room in a mixture of shock and disbelief, even though the room had very little to stare at. Minato and Kushina looked around at the bare room that was just barely adequate for a human being to live in. Jiraiya noticed the thick dust that seemed to settle in every corner of the room, telling him no one had been here in quite a while. Narumi and Naomi were comparing this room to theirs and suddenly felt very guilty about how their brother had to live. That was when everyone had the same exact thought, although unwillingly. Naruto is not here. Minato was the first to break from the trance everyone found themselves in at the sight of his son's room. His eyes spotted an envelope sitting on top of the dusty desk. Being curious of what it could be, he sat down in the chair and opened the letter, hoping for answers. His eyes slowly grew wider the more he read Naruto's letter. That is when he realized just how bad of a father he had been. No. Minato whispered as he read the last few paragraphs, though it was easily heard through the dead silent room. Minato's voice drew everyone over to him, and they each began to read the letter over his shoulder. Kushina brought a hand up to her mouth to try and cover the horrified gasp that threatened to escape from her mouth. Tears welled up in her eyes as she continued to read on, wishing she could stop, and as she went on she questioned how she could call herself a mother. Jiraiya was so shocked that he dropped the Toad contract as he read the letter 3 times over just to make sure his eyes weren't playing tricks on him. Naomi and Narumi were openly crying and silently speaking their brother's name. That was when the note started to break at the corners as Minato unknowingly started channeling his wind chakra in anger. Naruto's not told of all the beatings he would receive from the villagers on his birthday and how they would call him the demon child or Kyuubi. Naruto told them how he would often end up at the hospital for weeks on end as he recovered, only to be visited by Hiruzen or Makoto while they didn't show up once. He even told them how some of the beatings went where they ranged from having his nails pulled out to stabbings and bashings. And Naruto survived because the conscious had a small amount of chakra and would heal him while unconscious.
Naruto then told of how the ANBU who would watch him as they did all of the Hokage's kids would only stop the fox hunters when they were moments from killing him, which left him on the Shinigami's doorstep. He told them how the only ANBU who would prevent the beatings were Weasel and Nico. The only reason the room wasn't flooded with enough killer intent for the whole village to feel was because of the children's presence. Then came the last paragraph of the letter, which broke the hearts of each of the family members. It told them that Naruto had left of his own accord to find somewhere safe for him to live, and he was not sure if he would ever come back to the place he called a hellhole. How could this happen? How can I call myself a mother? Kushina asked, openly sobbing as she thought about what Naruto had gone through. Minato quickly stood up and wrapped his wife in a hug as she sobbed in his chest. Minato too questioned how he could call himself a father when a father was supposed to protect his child, something he didn't do. Narumi and Naomi were embracing each other, crying their eyes out as Jiraiya tried and failed to calm them down. It was official, this was the worst day of the namikaze Uzumaki's lives, yet the sun continued to shine. Shining for Naruto's liberation. Flashback end. Minato was broken from his thoughts when he heard a knock on the door to the Hokage's office. Come in. Minato ordered, watching the door open and his wife, daughters, student, and Sasuke and Sakura enter the room. Kushina gave her husband a bright smile, one mimicked by Naomi and Narumi, though to a lesser degree. Kakashi gave his sensei his usual eye smile while reaching for his Aika book, which was penned by Minato's sensei Jiraiya. Mission report? Minato asked, even though it was a command and he already knew the results of the mission since it was nothing more than menial labor. I don't see how cleaning a training ground is a mission. Sasuke said aloud, crossing his arms and closing his eyes, though Minato ignored the arrogant Uchiha in favor of looking at Kushina and Kakashi. Actually, it seems that the only one who responded to Sasuke was Sakura, who said so cool, practically drooling over the Uchiha. Kushina and Kakashi both nodded, telling their Hokage that the mission was successful and there were no complications. Minato was about to reach for the D-mission folder and Naomi caught this. She couldn't handle taking another D-rank mission that, and Sasuke's infinite arrogance was literally driving her insane. Tusan, can you please give us a C-rank mission? I just can't take these chores anymore. Minato saw that each of the genin gave small nods, agreeing with his daughter's words, well aside from Sakura, who looked unsure about the idea. Minato saw Kushina and Kakashi nod their heads, believing they were ready for the slight upgrade to their workload. Letting out a sigh, Minato grabbed the C mission folder and skimmed through it before pulling out a request and handing it to Kushina, who stepped up to accept the details. Your mission is to escort a bridge builder from the land of waves back home and protect him as he builds the bridge connecting the island to the mainland. You will meet your client in 2 hours in front of the main gates. Dismissed. Naomi whooped in joy and quickly took Narumi by the hand and led them off, with Kushina following, laughing at her daughters. Kakashi quickly left in a shunshin the minute the word dismissed was said, leaving Sasuke to walk with his fangirl hot on his heels. Minato let out a sigh and wondered if he had any normal shinobi in his service, as if on cue he heard shouts of youth from behind the doors. A figure wrapped in a gray cloak was walking calmly through a path leading to the village hidden in the leaves. The figure wondered why there would be a path that would lead into a village that was supposed to be hidden. Just as quick as the question came, so did an answer, and that answer was arrogance. Over the years, Konoha has become incredibly powerful with the Yellow Flash, god of shinobi, 2 of the Sannin, and shinobi such as Kakashi and Guy. They became the most powerful village. Titles like such often led to overblown egos, and Konoha was no exception. Why am I coming back to this place? Then images of a few people flooded the figure's mind, along with iconic places such as the Hokage Monument and Tower, along with the business district, came to thought. Right, I wish for the village to stand despite its unsavory characters. I sound like Madara did before he fled from the village. I guess he and I are more alike than I thought. Naruto thought with an amused smirk as his eyes flashed red under the hood he had covering his face from peering eyes. Naruto may have had no love for its people, but Konoha was still his home, and he would not let the likes of Kumo or Iwa try and destroy it. Itachi-sensei must be getting into my mind more than I like, but is that a bad thing? Naruto asked himself. Since leaving all those years ago, Naruto learned many things from Mihawk, and Itachi, his favorite, was that stoic appearance. It was like second nature now to Naruto, and he quite liked it that way. Now people couldn't read him well aside from his senseis. Seeing the large gates of Konoha passing by him as he walked, Naruto let his 3-tomo Sharingan fade, leaving cold blue eyes hidden by the shadow of his hood. Naruto decided he would keep his Uchiha blood secret until he determined that it was the right time to reveal it. Naruto caught sight of something that made Naruto wonder if Kami herself just loved to see how much she could make him miserable. Coming his way was Team 7 with Naomi and Narumi talking with each other, clearly excited about something. Naruto then recognized Itachi's younger brother being followed by a fangirl while brooding. Bringing up the rear was Kakashi and his so-called mother. Naruto didn't even flinch as he walked by Sasuke, who he was a few inches taller than thanks to a growth spurt due to Mihawk's dieting. Or at least he tried to walk by him, because at the last moment the Uchiha bumped into Naruto's shoulder. "Watch where you are going, you loser," Sasuke exclaimed as he turned around to glare at the unknown figure's back. Sasuke's angry shout stopped the rest of Team 7, who were now looking between the man in gray and Sasuke, wondering what they should do. Naruto just kept on walking. He had more important things to do than play with a spoiled child. "Hey, didn't you hear me?" Sasuke demanded, obviously not ready to let the issue drop. Kakashi was about to intervene to stop his new student from doing anything stupid. Sasuke acted first, though, caught up to Naruto's retreating form. Sasuke planned on teaching whoever it was under that cloak that they do not disrespect an Uchiha. With that, he gripped Naruto's shoulder, stopping his movement. "Looks like you need to be taught a lesson, idiot," Sasuke said rather arrogantly while smirking at the back of Naruto's head. Years of abuse made Naruto really dislike any form of contact that Naruto did not allow, and Sasuke was about to learn that the hard way. In an instant, Naruto had gripped Sasuke's wrist and flipped him over his shoulder, driving him into the ground. Without so much as a glance back, Naruto continued to walk away, leaving Sasuke to seethe on the dirt road. Managing to scramble to his feet, Sasuke glared at Naruto with black eyes filled with hatred for the person he had just met. "That's it, no one disrespects an Uchiha like that. We are the strongest clan in history. I'll kill you." Sasuke bellowed out in anger and rushed at Naruto's back with his fist cocked back. Naruto, who heard the shout, didn't react until Sasuke was a few paces away. That was when Naruto spun around and nailed Sasuke in the chest with a powerful kick that sent him back to his team. Sasuke was saved by Kakashi, who caught him, sparing him any more pain from a hard landing he was sure to take. Team 7 was checking to see if Sasuke was alright. Naruto continued to walk away from them, continuing on as if the encounter never happened. That was Itachi-sensei's brother? I am not very impressed, but I guess he did get him to accept hatred. You were lucky, Uchiha. Normally I would have killed you for that, but that would make me getting into the village next to impossible since he is one of the 2 remaining Uchiha. Deciding to save time and get the meeting with quicker, Naruto vanished in a murder of crows, leaving only a black feather. Team 7 turned to look at where the figure in gray was standing, only to see that he was no longer there, and all that was left was a black feather. Kushina and Kakashi were staring at the oddly familiar feather with interest. Naomi and Narumi were wondering just who that was because from height he seemed to be around their age. Tazuna was laughing at the brooding Uchiha for getting his ass kicked while wondering if he could hire the figure in gray. Sasuke thought he had scared him off something. Sakura verbalized, getting silent groans from everyone else. With the encounter with Naruto behind them, they left for Nami no Kuni with one thought. Who was that? Minato was discussing with his predecessor Hiruzen Sarutobi about recent events that happened in Kirigakure. Apparently, the woman named Meitarumi had united the bloodline users into a rebel army to fight Yagura, the Yonde Mizukage, who was exterminating the bloodline users. They had come to Konoha to ask for assistance 3 years ago, and after a long council meeting, Minato had to inform Mei that the Leaf could not assist. It was the most recent news was what was unsettling to the Kage and former Kage. It appears that Mei was able to find most of Kiri's 7 ninja swordsmen, and that was the last report they had received. Both Hiruzen and Minato knew that if the rebels had won the war, then the Leaf had a potentially new enemy, which was something they did not need, seeing as IWA was still less than neutral to their presence. Having another potential relationship like Konoha did with IWA, with Kiri, was something that Konoha couldn't afford. Even with Suna's aid, if Konoha was to go to war, they would have to face IWA, then Kiri would no doubt assist, not to mention what the prideful Raikage would do. Even as strong as Konoha is, it could not withstand a multi-front war with 2 villages with a chance of a third. Any more discussion was interrupted by a murder of crows flocking together in the center of the Hokage's office. Hiruzen and Minato's eyes widened because they knew only one person who used crows, and that was Konoha's second most wanted criminal, Itachi Uchiha. Konoha must have become very lax if I am able to enter the Hokage's office just like that. A calm voice came from under the gray cloak that stepped from the crows. Hiruzen and Minato were confused now, since this was clearly not Itachi, but this also made them weary since they didn't notice the man until the crows suddenly burst into the room. Nico, while I appreciate what you have done for me earlier in life, it would be better for your health if you remove the sword from my neck. Naruto said calmly, but the threat was not missed by the shinobi in the room. His words were so calm it actually made the ANBU behind him, who was indeed Nico, flinch slightly. Naruto was about to react when the blade was not moved, but that was stopped when he saw his father suddenly get to his feet. Naruto could clearly see that he was not happy with what was happening right in front of your eyes. What is the meaning of this? Who sent you here? Minato demanded, his voice full of the authority that made him feared as a powerful shinobi. He was not happy that someone could so easily stroll into his village through the detection barrier, nonetheless show up right in front of his eyes. Naruto didn't even flinch at the tone of the powerful shinobi in front of him, since he knew all he needed to do was flick the hood of his cloak down. Naruto's face showed nothing but cold indifference as he stared down what could be called the most powerful man in the world. I guess you wouldn't recognize my voice. It has been 5 years since I have been here, and much longer since we had any kind of conversation. Naruto mused as he reached up and pulled his hood off of his head. Minato fell back into his seat when he saw Naruto's face. It was more narrowed out than he remembered from when he was younger. His black hair had grown longer and had almost dropped over his right eye. His eyes that were once warm when looking at him now felt like small icebergs. It hurt his heart knowing that it was his negligence that caused his son to be like that. "And Naruto, what are you doing here?" Minato asked in shock at seeing the sight of his son who he had not seen in 5 years. Minato always thought that if Naruto came back it would be because he was forced, not because he came here willingly. Naruto could see that Hiruzen was equally surprised considering his pipe was resting on the floor in front of his feet. Naruto couldn't see Nico's face, but there was a very small trembling in the blade that only he could see. As much as he enjoyed watching Minato going through emotional turmoil, he was growing tired of being in the man's presence. "I came back to Konoha to become a shinobi," Naruto stated simply as he moved the blade of Yugao from the nape of his neck. In action, the purple-haired ANBU didn't fight. Naruto kept an impassive gaze as he watched Minato's face become hopeful. Naruto decided he would crush that hope right now before it grew any larger. "I chose Konoha because it was the most logical option, seeing as Kumo would try to experiment on my body to see if I had a Kekkei Genkai because of your actions. IWA would certainly kill me the moment they found of our relation, even if it is only because of blood. I do not know enough about Kiri to make an informed decision because of their foolish war. Suna would just hand me back to you because of the alliance and their own lack of power to hold me. Do not think that I came here because of any other reason than that it was the most logical." Naruto finished his reasoning coolly, making Minato's face drop in sadness. Hiruzen, seeing that the younger Kage was in no shape to respond, decided to intervene on his behalf. "While I am glad you are back, I would like to know where you think you should be classified as?" Hiruzen asked, trying to fish information on the enigma known as Naruto Uzumaki namikaze. Naruto was smiling inwardly at the man who was like a grandfather to him, but he still would not let anything out unless he deemed it necessary. Turning his head, Naruto kept an impassive look on his face, but Hiruzen could see the smallest spark of warmth in there that widened the smile already on his face. "I believe I should be ranked as a genin like all those my age," Naruto stated simply as he looked at Hiruzen, then to Minato, who had regained himself. He could see the confusion on their faces, no doubt expecting him to try and boast. Naruto called them foolish silently for such thinking. Information could lead to any shinobi's death, and he was by no means an exception. "I have not been trained in this village, so promoting me to anything else would create animosity between myself and the other shinobi. Or they will see it as Minato giving me a promotion and not myself earning it." Naruto clarified his reasoning, managing to do it without admitting he was related to the namikaze. Minato was saddened that Naruto refused to call him father, but if half of what that letter said was true, he had no right to ask Naruto to do so. Getting Naruto to be a shinobi wouldn't be too hard considering he was his son, and hopefully this could be the start to trying to build a relationship. "That can be managed, Naruto, but I need to ask you to take part in a spar so I can see your capabilities. This is my one requirement," Minato stated firmly as he watched Naruto's hand reach behind his back, where took note of the handle that was covered by a guard and hand a small charm hanging from it. "That is acceptable," Naruto said, simply standing there with his arms crossed over his chest and an impassive gaze. Naruto had already assumed he would need to do something along those lines to gain entrance into the village. Knowing that his opponent would most likely be a jounin, he revealed his crows, and he would show his kenjutsu prowess. "Before that, do you know of any apartments available at the moment?" Naruto inquired, not once breaking from that calm, almost condescending tone of voice. Minato was about to protest the decision and state that his son should live in the namikaze compound. Naruto cut off the predictable response with a raised hand. "Since I am to be a shinobi, I also am considered an adult, and you have no right to decide where I live. My question remains." Minato silently cursed those long-standing rules since he knew Naruto was right about that and there was nothing he could do. I believe there is an empty floor in a complex in the red light district. Minato said, evenly trying to see how Naruto would react to living in such a shady place. Minato sighed when Naruto didn't even raise an eyebrow to the information presented to him. I believe Nico here can escort you to the building since Hiruzen-san and I have business we need to discuss privately. Naruto report to Training Ground 7 in 5 hours for your test. Naruto didn't even nod his head. He turned to Yugao and looked at her expectantly for a few moments before she realized he was ready to go with it. The two shinobi left the room. Yugao and Naruto had been walking in what was an awkward silence for Yugao since she had quite a few questions for Naruto. It had been years since she had seen him as a young boy, and no, here he was completely different. She was only 14 during that time, so the ANBU had her watch over the village pariah. She wanted to know where he went for so long and just how much he changed. How are you, Naruto? She finally managed to say something and cursed herself for something so stupid. It only got worse when she saw Naruto's eyebrow rise when she asked her question. I am well. Naruto replied, clearly not interested in putting too much effort into the conversation. Yugao half expected that kind of answer if Naruto's interaction with the Hokage was any indication. Sparing a glance at her one-time charge, Yugao decided to try again to get Naruto to engage in a conversation. Why did you leave, Naruto? Yugao asked, more curious than anything else. After all, he was the Hokage's son. He could have had anything he wanted, and he would have got it. Yugao was glad to see Naruto had not reacted negatively to her question. He actually kept walking with the same facial expression, making her wonder if he was even listening to her. I left Konoha to learn how to protect myself. Naruto answered, telling the truth since that was his reason. It was true that Itachi and Yugao did protect him when he was younger, but that was then. Now he could only rely on himself for protection, and to do that he needed to get stronger, which he did. Naruto had not fooled himself into believing that he was almighty. No, Naruto knew he still had much more growing to do. His eyes alone had much more potential than they were letting on. Naruto made sure he would make use of this potential to further his ambitions. The two were now firmly in the red light district and were seemingly oblivious to their surroundings. Well, Yugao was, because she was busy trying to figure out the new Naruto walking with her. Naruto was highly aware of the people around them going about their daily lives, but he chose to ignore them. Naruto knew that Yugao wanted to learn more about him and decided to help her out in what would seem to be an indirect way. The Hokage will no doubt come to see my test. If anyone had a grudge against him, this would be the perfect time to act, no matter how foolish it would be to do so. Yugao turned her head to look at Naruto to see what he meant by those words, but his face gave away nothing. What did he mean by that? Could he be planning to attack Yondaime-sama? No, he knows that no one in this village would do so, not to mention Hokage-sama's power is only rivaled by Lord Third. Wait, he is telling me that I could watch over Hokage-sama as well as see his battle. Thank you, Naruto. That was when the two shinobi arrived at the door to Naruto's flat. Turning to face Yugao with his door to the back, Naruto looked into the slit eyes on the mask. Thank you, Yugao. Naruto thanked her before entering his new home. Yugao stood there in front of the door in shock, staring at nothing as she tried to make sense of what just happened. Not once during his time with the Hokage did he say thank you. And this new Naruto doesn't seem to say things just to say it. Yugao left in a leaf Shunshin to return to her duty of guarding the Hokage, but there was a small smile on her facial features behind her mask. The time limit given had passed for Naruto to take his test, and still Naruto was sitting on the center training post in Training Ground 7. It was only a few hours from dusk, yet Naruto's body language only showed calm despite his opponent seeming to be late. Naruto decided to review his time back in Konoha, which was rather pleasant. No one bothered him inside of his new flat. Even the ANBU, who were no doubt watching him, were keeping their wits to themselves. On his way to the training ground, he did not receive any glares. He even got a few smiles, mostly from children, but there were a few from some of the adults. Naruto knew he was only on the receiving end of those smiles because they did not know who he was. Naruto had shed his gray traveling cloak since he was now in the village. Underneath he had a gray zip-up vest with a hood and short sleeves. The vest held an interesting design of 9 magatama around the neckline, and they were crimson in color. Naruto wore black ANBU pants with short boots that went up to his ankles. The reason for that was many times in battle Mihawk stepped on his toes, calling him an idiot for having such a glaring opening. His hands were clad with black fingerless gloves to protect his hands, a common practice for swordsmen. It seems that they are here, Naruto thought, since he could feel a chakra signature in the forest in front of him. He recognized the signature as Yugao's signature. He had become quite accustomed to it since she was the only person he had extensive exposure to. If Yugao is here, then the Yondaime and the old man are probably near her. No surprise, I can't feel their signatures. They aren't Hokages for a reason, Naruto concluded as he continued to sit in a meditative position atop the training post. That was when a second chakra signature flared up in the woods behind him for a moment. That was when a fireball came from the same part of the woods that Naruto felt the chakra burst coming from. The fireball quickly engulfed Naruto's seated position and expanded slightly, swallowing up the entire training post. The ball of flames shrouded the poof of smoke that emerged when the fireball contacted Naruto. Each set of eyes in the premises were trained on the scorched post, where there were no sign of Naruto or even a training post. The real Naruto, who was sitting in the forest, stealthily made his way to a tree behind where his clone sitting and saw a shinobi sitting there crouched and focused on the field.
Yes, I am still here, Naruto whispered softly, making the shinobi in front of him tense since he had not detected Naruto's presence. Before he was even able to react, Naruto kicked him from his perch and knocked him into the open training field, where he dropped down into soon after. Naruto saw that his opponent was a tall man with dark, spiky hair, and he was wearing red-rimmed sunglasses, which Naruto found useless considering the sun was going to go down soon. The man was wearing the standard leaf jounin garb with a leaf headband that was tilted to the left slightly. Naruto decided he would get straight to the point since he didn't feel like wasting any more of his time with this useless test. Naruto reached behind him and pulled out his blade that was hidden by his cloak earlier. The blade was a finely crafted katana with the handle wrapped in a black fabric that had diamonds cut into the fabric, showing the white handle underneath. The handle also had a handguard encompassing it on each side to prevent damaged hands. That also let the charm be clipped onto, so it was resting on the back of his hands as he gripped the handle of his blade. The blade was made of chakra conductive metal, where the top of the blade was a jet black. The bottom of the blade was a snow-white color, and where they had met it was a shade of gray, much like the coat of a wolf. This was the blade known as Twilight, and it was a gift from both Mifune and Mihawk. Naruto watched with an impassive face as the wind blew his hood down, revealing his cold blue eyes to the special jounin Aoba. That was when he saw Aoba pull free his own katana that was completely black from blade to the hilt. While intrigued by the black blade, Naruto moved to engage his opponent, bringing Twilight down in a slashing motion which was blocked by Aoba. Aoba tried to push back on Naruto but found that countered as Naruto let his katana slide lower on the black blade and forced it up. Planning on forcing his advantage, Naruto flipped Twilight horizontally and went to stab Aoba, but the sunglasses-wearing ninja was already out of his reach. Hokage-sama's son is very skilled with his blade. Perhaps I should have not challenged him with my own blade. Aoba rushed forward and re-engaged the younger raven-haired boy in another kenjutsu exchange. The two blades clashed with each other over and over, sparks showering from each point of contact. Both Aoba and Naruto knew that Naruto was getting the better of the exchange and was forcing Aoba back. When Aoba made a mistake in lunging too far with one of his sword swipes, Naruto scored a hit by cutting Aoba across the right arm, making Aoba hiss in pain. Aoba jumped back and looked at Naruto for a moment to see what seemed to be a bored look on his face. Taking his actions as accommodating, Aoba glanced down to examine his new wound, and he was pleased to see that it was a light cut. It looks like I won't be able to best him in a kenjutsu duel, so why not add a bit on ninjutsu? He hasn't even performed a hand sign yet. Aoba observed, not believing that Naruto could do ninjutsu, but what he wasn't aware of was that Naruto just did not wish for that information to be revealed. Meanwhile, in the woods, standing and watching the fight, were Hiruzen and Minato, with Yugo hiding in a tree near them, also watching Naruto's performance. Each of the three Konoha shinobi were amazed at Naruto's skill, especially Yugo, who specialized with a blade. Naruto-kun's skill with that katana is exceptional. Hiruzen commented with no small amount of pride in the young man in front of him. If he had to guess, Naruto's skill was high chunin to low jounin level. He wondered just who could have taught him such skills. The only people he could think of would have been the samurai of Tetsu no Kuni. Of course there was Kyumo, but they would no doubt kill Naruto if he asked to be trained by them, since he was Minato's son. Yes, his sword skills are very well refined, though he hasn't shown any ninjutsu or genjutsu skills to accompany his kenjutsu. However, he is keeping Aoba in a close quarters combat scenario to prevent him from using his ninjutsu while pressing his advantage in the field of kenjutsu. Minato concluded his analysis and could say that was at least a chunin level of thought. Minato was sure that Naruto could be chunin if he wanted to, because he could also see the way he carried himself was that of someone who had seen battle. Minato just wondered how much he had seen. Yugo was silently watching as Naruto skillfully countered each of his opponent's attacks and scored more than his share of glancing blows. She could tell Naruto was holding back, since it was nothing more than a spar. Amazing, he is doing all of this with just the base kenjutsu style. He has yet to use any techniques, and he has a clear advantage. Yugo thought, watching as Naruto kept Aoba on the defensive. Yugo made a note to have a duel with Naruto when she had some off time to see just how skilled he was, because it was clear to her, an experienced swordswoman, that Naruto was holding back. Yes, Naruto-kun is very combat aware to keep Aoba from using whatever advantages he may have over him. He would make an excellent chunin, but he seems to be content with being a genin. I guess that doesn't matter though, since the chunin exams are coming up in a few months. Hiruzen replied with a small smile, since he couldn't wait to see who he considered to be a grandson excel like he knew he would. Hiruzen knew Naruto was hiding his skills from them, even if it was to your own village. Deception was still a shinobi's most powerful weapon. Yes, and we will be hosting these exams. Minato confirmed Hiruzen's statement with a nod of his head as his thoughts drifted to the chunin exams. The blonde Kage wondered how many teams would be sent to Konoha from the other villages. It would make sense for them to showcase their shinobi to show they were stronger than the other villages' shinobi. He made note to expand the stadium they had built already to accommodate what he assumed would be one of the largest exams in history. Minato sighed softly when he imagined the paperwork he would have to do. There has to be some way to defeat the monster known as paperwork. Minato thought desperately. This kid is ridiculous. If this wasn't just a spar, I would have been dead many times over. I guess it wasn't wise to challenge him with a sword, since it has been a while since I used my black blade. Planting his hand in the dirt, Aoba used his leg to sweep Naruto's legs out from under him. Naruto reacted late and was clipped in the ankle, making him stumble midair, which Aoba used to his advantage by slamming a fist into his torso. There, that was the space I needed. Now I can use my jutsu. Aoba held a hand sign after going through a small chain of signs. Scattering thousand crows technique. Aoba pointed his finger and hundreds of crows flocked around Naruto, cawing and flapping their wings, covering Naruto's vision, impaired with loose feathers. Naruto remained calm as he stared at the crows closely as Aoba continued to blind his younger opponent. This will make my black blade strikes next to impossible to see, let alone dodge. Aoba thought confidently as he tightened his grip on the black hilt of his black blade. Aoba paused momentarily as we watched Naruto remain stationary as he stared at his flock of crows. Why isn't he trying to escape, or at least bat the crows away? Ah, now it makes sense. These are not crows, but blackbirds. Naruto stated plainly as he turned to where Aoba was last. He couldn't see Aoba, but if he could, he would see the shocked visage on his face. Naruto was curious as to why Aoba called them crows, since only Itachi and himself had signed the crow contract. Upon closer examination of these so-called crows, Naruto could see that they were actually smaller than a crow and had a colorful patch under their wings. Naruto could only assume he used the word crow to strike more fear into opponents, since crows were known to be scavengers, an interesting ploy indeed. "I will show you crows," Naruto stated plainly, making a few hand signs with one hand, and crows started to emerge from his body and chased away the smaller blackbirds. That was the useful aspect of the crows. The smaller summons were actually murders of crows and not a singular one, and required small amounts of chakra to call. Naruto stood there calmly as his crows chased off the blackbirds, leaving black feathers to fall around him, leaving him in a ring of black feathers. Naruto stared impassively, his eyes devoid of emotion, as Aoba stared with wide eyes behind his sunglasses. No one had ever been able to see through that technique before. Naruto did just that, but also disabled it. "I have had enough of this," Naruto stated to himself as he started to channel his chakra through Twilight, but instead of glowing blue like the usual form chakra would take, it was gray with small flickers of red. He didn't want to reveal too much, but he needed to end this before he was forced to reveal a few more of his tricks. Naruto readied his hand, and with a single flourish of his hand, the chakra shot from the length of his blade and expanded out horizontally. Aoba, Minato, Hiruzen, and Yugo all were looking at the way of gray chakra with the small red flickers with surprise. That is the technique of the samurai. Kami no Ken no Mai, severance from the material world. Naruto's technique went unheard to everyone else simply because he said it in a low whisper as to keep it away from their ears. Not that Aoba would have heard it anyways, as he was too busy trying to avoid the massive wave of chakra. Aoba's only option was to fall onto his back, because he didn't even have the time to drop on his hands and knees. That was what Naruto needed. Rushing forward, Naruto pointed Twilight at Aoba's neck with the same cold, empty look in his cerulean eyes. "Submit." Naruto said it wasn't even a demand, since he knew the shinobi was not foolish enough to say no. Aoba simply nodded his head, swallowing a lump in his throat. Nodding his head approvingly, Naruto removed his blade away and strapped it back onto his back and looked up. He saw Minato, Hiruzen, and Yugo each standing on a tree stump looking at Naruto. Those 3 trees were not the only ones cut clean through. The cut went through 10 trees in both directions and at least 3 rows back into the forest. Naruto waited patiently as the observers walked forward and Minato dismissed Aoba. Naruto could see the pride in Minato's eyes, and he wondered how the man could feel any pride for someone he cast away like a piece of used paper. "Naruto, what was that technique?" Minato asked, hopefully being able to get Naruto to tell him something concrete. Naruto had not shown anything except crows and a skill with his katana, and he just needed to know more. Maybe all that time with Kushina and his daughters was starting to change his personality. Naruto let one of his eyebrows raise. Did he really expect Naruto to just give away his information? He may have hidden it with curiosity, but he was still fishing for information, Naruto's information. Naruto personally had no plans to share anything with this man, especially this man. It was a chakra flow technique. Naruto stated what they all obviously saw. This way he was able to be vague and say he answered the question. Yugo watched as Naruto spoke with Hiruzen before going to Minato and receiving his leaf headband, which was placed on a black fabric. She was amazed by the cutting strength behind Naruto's attack and knew that he had his own style of kenjutsu. All of this only made her want a duel with the young shinobi even more than before. She briefly entertained the idea of asking Naruto about his style, but killed that idea since this Naruto was much more guarded than the one from his childhood years. But maybe if she got to spend more time with him, then she could try to ask. Maybe not. "I will take my leave now," Naruto stated simply when he received no disagreement. Naruto's body dissembled into a murder of crows, each cawing loudly as they flew away. The 2 Kage and 1 Anbu stood there in the field at dusk as a small wind blew across the field, staring at the spot Naruto was occupying. Each went their own way, their duties for the day done with, and many differing things to think about. Some of these thoughts revolved around Naruto's return and some did not. All that was certain was that things were bound to get exciting in the Hidden Leaf Village. Naruto was laying on his new bed inside of his new home and was simply staring at the ceiling, his blue eyes still containing that cold glimmer. Even though this new home was just as empty as his old room when he lived with the namikazes, he felt much more at home. Naruto was resting with his hands folded behind his head and Twilight leaning on the bed just in case one of those foolish villages tried anything against him. Naruto's eyes glanced at the door to his bedroom, but what he saw was all of the doors in his new home. I need to brush up on my fuinjutsu, Naruto reminded himself, since he had slacked off on his training in that art. The first step in my plan is complete. I now have a village to protect me from the other villages. Now all I need to do is grow here in Konoha while keeping an eye out for internal threats. Then once I have the power I desire, I will begin to exterminate these threats. For Konoha, Naruto said mentally before falling asleep, Itachi's influence showing clearly in Naruto's thoughts. The business sector of Konohagakure no Sato was alive and bustling with people each trying to find the best deals or a place to eat lunch. It was a place that was alive until the dead of night with those who were searching for something. People were chatting and exchanging money for goods with happy smiles on their face when they found their desired objects, or a disheartened expression when their search was fruitless. The people were going through an age of economic prosperity thanks to the accomplishments of their village's Kage. Konoha's economy was the classic case of a trickle-down effect. Minato Namikaze was a shinobi of extraordinary caliber with an even greater legend pinned with his name. It was these accomplishments that brought the minor shinobi villages to Konoha's doorstep for the creation economic trading between the various parties. With those trading agreements, the influx of goods came in more products and the demand for Konoha products to bring to new markets. This gave people new creature comforts to purchase in hopes to impress people or just live comfortably. One thing was certain though, and that was there were happy smiles on the faces of the civilians. The atmosphere around the village, hidden in the leaves, could be called jovial. There was a pair of ice-cold blue eyes that could see through all of this happiness to see the true nature of the people around him. Under this facade of glee and celebration, Naruto could see what was truly lurking there. It was greed and malice, just like Naruto was subjugated to all those years ago when things weren't going so well. That was when the village was recovering and their hate drew them to the nine-tailed demon fox, or in their eyes Naruto. Even the children at that time who knew not of the pain caused by the fox ignored him and left him in isolation. It was for that blind hatred and abandonment that Naruto had lost all attachment to people of the village aside from a select few. One visible eye staring impassively as he walked and another hidden by the black hair hanging over the eye. Naruto watched these people go on with their insignificant lives. Naruto's figure most have gave him an air of professionalism, since the adults would give him smiles as he walked by, which he ignored. The only time Naruto showed any form of reaction was when a group of children around the age of 7 or 8 stopped in front of him and gave him bright smiles and small waves. That was the time Naruto nodded to them with the faintest of smiles on his lips. Those children had not done anything to contribute to his misery, and for that reason he would acknowledge them. People who had yet to be corrupted by hate had been protected from the world by their upbringing. Now Naruto didn't believe that meant they were sheltered. No, that just meant they had yet to see the true evil that the world could dish out. Natural death, while sad, did not fill a person with hate. Only the actions of another could create such strong feelings in a human being. If someone lost a loved one or thing thanks to the actions of another or a group, their heart would no doubt bear hatred. Naruto just happened to channel his hatred for the betterment of what he held dear instead of the path of the avenger. Naruto continued on his stroll through the village's business sector, silently making his way to his original destination. Naruto, after about 20 more minutes of walking at a relaxed pace, made his way into the Uchiha district. Naruto gazed around and pictured hundreds of Uchiha littering the streets, some nervous about their coup and others living innocently. Naruto could only imagine what the former Uchiha clan were thinking when they thought they could get away with something like a revolt. I can tell you what they were thinking. They thought that their eyes made them a force of nature. It was that thought that made Itachi kill them all, for their foolishness. The Uchiha would have had to first mobilize enough assets to defeat Minato, and as much as Naruto disliked admitting that alone would be challenging. Then they would have had to deal with Hiruzen as well before they took over the seat of Hokage. Even if they managed to deal with those two Kage, then the Uchiha would have to battle with the other clans in the village to assume control of Konoha. That would be no simple task for another hidden village, let alone one clan. Itachi's way of killing the Uchiha was the most peaceful way of settling the issue of the Uchiha uprising. If he did not, then the village would have been tossed into a civil war, killing many civilians. Fools so easily blinded by power were not meant to wield power, and that included the former Uchiha clan. Naruto also grouped Minato into that grouping since he allowed the civilian and council push around him, the Hokage around when they were meant to be simple advisors. Naruto found it amusing that out all of the Hokage, that he respected was the Senju brothers Hashirama and Tobirama. Naruto respected their power, however he by no means liked the two legendary Senju. It was impossible for a Senju and an Uchiha to like each other, but respecting each other was another story altogether. Naruto walked right up to a large clan house and knocked on the door and waited patiently for a response. Naruto allowed his focus to drift to the numerous empty buildings that were towering over the area, casting shadows of the past on the hollow ground. Naruto internally mused how long it would take for the council to try and raise the Uchiha district just so they could make more money. No, that would be the reason they would give, but in truth, they would do that to try and wipe away the stain the massacre left on the village. Perception is reality. The soft sound of light, approaching footsteps knocked Naruto from his internal observations on the village. Naruto only had to wait a few more moments for the door he knocked on to open up. The person who had opened the door was Makoto Uchiha, one of the few people Naruto would say that he cared for in the village. Makoto had not changed much since Naruto had left. She still had long black hair and black eyes. To Naruto she appeared to have gotten shorter, but that was thanks to the growing he went through during his time with Mihawk and Itachi. Naruto's normally frozen blue eyes held an affectionate warmth in them as Makoto gasped before pulling the younger Ravenet into a motherly hug. Naruto slowly wrapped his arms around the Uchiha woman, returning the embrace. Itachi had told him that he was allowed to spare both his mother and his younger brother. At first he was to just spare Sasuke, but it seems that Kushina was able to convince her husband to keep her best friend, Makoto, alive. Naruto was glad to see the woman who was his mother in all facets of the word during his childhood, unlike Kushina. Naruto found himself being pulled into the house without a word being said, not that he minded Makoto brining him in. Soon Naruto and Makoto were sitting on a couch in what appeared to be the living room. The smile Makoto was giving Naruto made his heart warm with happiness and joy. Hanging around with two stoic, serious men like Itachi and Mihawk will often cool if not freeze one's emotions. Naruto took no time in returning Makoto's warm smile with a smaller yet equally affectionate smile. "When did you get back, Naruto-kun?" Makoto asked, barely able to contain her excitement from seeing her surrogate son. "I just got back yesterday, but I couldn't visit you because I had some business to take care of with the Hokage," Naruto replied in an even tone, since thinking about Minato often drained him of any positive emotions he may have been feeling at the time. He planned on visiting Makoto if he had the time, but yesterday just did not allow it. He thought of sending a Kage Bunshin, but decided he wanted to talk with Makoto in person. Using a clone to talk with Makoto felt just wrong, but that was only because of who it was. Naruto would have no problem with sending a shadow clone to address Minato or the council. "That is okay. I am just glad you are finally back," Makoto chirped happily, giving Naruto's hand a gentle squeeze. In reality, she was more than glad. She was elated that Naruto had finally come back. Her relationship with Sasuke had all but deteriorated as more time passed after the massacre. Sasuke was so set in getting stronger that he dismissed Makoto's credentials, babbling she was nothing more than a housewife. Apparently Sasuke was not aware that Makoto was on par with Kushina in terms of strength, and those two were plenty capable jounin. "How was your training?" Makoto asked excitedly. Naruto went on to tell her how he and Mihawk left the village that night and started their journey for the Land of Iron. Naruto told Makoto how Naruto had taken his first life in the land of lightning when he and Mihawk had come across a settlement of bandits. Naruto told her how Mihawk said that killing someone under his eye now was a better choice than having him doing it later and freezing up, something Makoto agreed with. Naruto then recalled his time in Tetsu no Kuni and how he created his own sword style under the eye of Mifune and Mihawk. Naruto then told Makoto about how he had 3 natural affinities, which were fire, wind, and lightning. Naruto remembered how Mihawk and Itachi referenced those 3 affinities as the 3 affinities of destruction. Naruto told Makoto how while improving his wind-style ninjutsu with Mihawk he learned his fire styles with Itachi. Mifune and Mihawk assisted in accompanying those styles with his swordplay. Makoto's smile grew wider hearing Naruto's admission, getting over the initial surprise of Naruto having 3 affinities. She offered to help Naruto train his lightning affinity. This brought a small smile to Naruto's face since he was just going to grab some scrolls to train, but learning from someone with more experience was always far better than reading it from a scroll. Come Naruto, and now you are going to show me just how far you have come with the scroll Shisui and I gave you. Makoto said happily as she pulled Naruto from the house to the wide backyard behind the house. Naruto took a moment to admire the natural beauty that the trees and flowers seemed to give to the training area. There was even a small pond at the far end of the field for what Naruto guessed was water-style ninjutsu. Naruto blinked away the days he found himself pulled into by the nature around him. Naruto focused in on Makoto, who was standing across from them. Well then, show me how far you have come, Naruto-chan. Naruto did not visibly react to Makoto's rather obvious attempt to get under his skin with that insulting suffix. Instead of showing agitation, Naruto brought his hand over one of the crimson magatama on his zip-up vest. There was a small plume of smoke before Naruto found himself with a handful of shuriken. Naruto chucked the 5 black stars at Makoto. Not waiting for results, he held a hand sign and vanished in thin air. Makoto avoided the spinning stars of death easily and glanced to her left where Naruto had reappeared. Naruto quickly threw more shuriken at Makoto. Makoto, who did not have her own ninja tools, could only avoid the projectiles instead of deflecting them. Makoto caught a small flash of smoke from the corner of her eye and turned her head to look at the smoke to see that it was already gone and Naruto was there. Makoto reacted with a kick aimed at Naruto's chest, which Naruto could not avoid thanks to his attempt to rise up before the kick was thrown at him. Naruto crossed his arms in front of his chest using his forearms to absorb the impact behind the kick. Naruto slid back from the force of the kick and started to shake the tingling in his arms away. Your Shunshin Jutsu was nearly flawless, but your substitution jutsu could use some work.
Now Naruto, and show me your elemental dash. Makoto's request was cut short when both she and Naruto focused in on the puff of smoke that erupted in between the two. When the smoke blew away, it revealed an ANBU crouched, facing Naruto. The ANBU was dressed in a standard ANBU attire with a bear mask. Naruto just knew he wasn't about to like what this man had to say to him. Namikaze-sama, Hokage-sama requires your presence immediately. Bear's tone was calm yet insistent. Naruto frowned for a moment before it washed away under a look of boredom that took over Naruto's face. He wondered if Minato already had something for him to do already. Naruto glanced over to Makoto to see her nodding her head, understanding that he had to go for the time being. Naruto, not even bothering to acknowledge the ANBU, held a hand sign and vanished in a shunshin. The bear-masked ANBU quickly followed suit in a hidden leaf shunshin to return to his duties. Makoto sighed softly before walking back into her home. Naruto formed from a murder of crows inside of the Hokage's office, alerting the man who was his father to his presence. Naruto figured just showing up in a shunshin would end poorly for him since it was unwise to startle a Kage. Once fully formed, Naruto found himself looking at a smiling Minato namikaze. Naruto just stared at the man with an impassive gaze as he brought his arms up and crossed them over his chest. Naruto was irritated that he had to leave one of his favorite people for one he had nothing positive to say about. Minato's smile faltered, realizing that Naruto was not going to say a word until addressed. I have received a request for backup from Team 7. It would appear that their mission to escort Tazuna, the bridge builder to the land of waves, has taken a turn for the worst. On the way to Nami no Kuni they were attacked by 3 swordsmen of the Hidden Mist. Zabuza Momochi, the demon of the Hidden Mist. A former missing nin from Kirigakure who wields the Kobikurabocho but was reported to be wearing a Kiri headband without the cut across the Kiri insignia. Accompanying Zabuza was Kushimaru Kuriere. We were under the impression Kushimaru had fled from Kiri, but that seems to not be the case. There is also another, a boy around your age who has pointed teeth and blue hair. There is no intel on this boy. Minato relayed what Kushina and Kakashi had given him into a report. Normally I would send another genin team to back up Team 7, however the other teams are already out doing missions in the fields. That is why I will be sending you to Nami no Kuni, alone. Minato added to see if Naruto would show anything similar to an outward reaction, but Naruto did not even bat an eyelash. Naruto continued to stare at Minato with one cold eye visible and the other hidden by his black hair. I am safe in assuming that you know where Nami no Kuni is. Naruto just nodded his head slowly to his Kage's question. Minato waved his hand dismissing Naruto, who took his leave immediately via Shunshin since he had all he needed. Naruto was walking through the streets of the Nami no Kuni and it reminded him of how he was forced to live when he was a child in Konoha. Most of the food the vendors were displaying were rotten or on the verge of rotting. All of the buildings looked like they were on their last leg and one good, strong wind would knock over the buildings. Each of the towns Naruto had passed on the way looked much like this one. Naruto found a rather modest-looking pub and figured that he could find what he was looking for there. Opening the doors, Naruto took note of the oppressive atmosphere lingering in the pub that engulfed him as he stepped in. Naruto silently listened to the quiet conversations that were going on around the bar. Naruto continued to hear the name Gato in each of the conversations he listened in on. Naruto went through all the information he had learned during his travels with Mihawk and Itachi. Gato is the business tycoon and shipping magnate. Founded Gato Company and is apparently occupying land of Great River along with Nami no Kuni. Possible that he hired the Kiri shinobi to remove Tazuna, whose bridge would break his monopoly. Yeah, apparently Tazuna-san has hired some shinobi so that he can finish the bridge. That was why he had all those extra people with him. I am just glad he lives at the far east end of the village, that way I'll be safe if they get caught in a shinobi battle. That last exclamation got a round of cheers from the other patrons. A few of them didn't look too happy with what the unnamed man said. This told Naruto that these people were probably bridge workers under Tazuna's lead. Naruto moved from his spot leaning near the entrance and walked out of the bar since he heard all he needed. It only took Naruto around 10 minutes to get to the end of the small village, and that was just because he took his time. Naruto came up to a rather modest 2-story home and knocked on the door. It only took a few moments for someone to open the door and greet Naruto. The person who greeted Naruto was a woman with long navy blue hair and a pink shirt and was looking at Naruto questioningly. "Hello, my name is Tsunami. May I ask why you are here and who you are?" Tsunami asked politely as she kept the door partially open, shielding part of her body. "Hello, my name is Naruto and I am here as the reinforcements that the team called for." Naruto explained in his normal bored tone, but there was a politeness mixed in there with the usual monotone. Naruto watched with bored, blue eyes as he saw Tsunami's naturally guarded posture visibly relax and her smile brightened. Tsunami stepped to the side and let the door open for Naruto to make his way into the home. Naruto stepped inside of the margin with his hood over his head. He could hear the loud chatter of his sisters and mother in the other room with a more masculine voice laughing. He assumed that was the bridge builder, Tazuna, since Kakashi was not quite as scruffy. "My, they sent you all alone. You're no older than the others with Kakashi-san and Kushina-san. Tsunami said with no small amount of surprise that Naruto alone was the reinforcing force Konoha had sent. Naruto chose not to reply to Tsunami's statement since it was clear the woman was ignorant to the shinobi world. In the world of the shinobi there were children younger than Naruto and stronger than Kakashi who was a high A-rank shinobi in his own right. That wasn't the woman's fault though since Nami no Kuni had no shinobi force stationed within its borders. The only thing they had resembling a military was the daimyo's personal samurai guard. Naruto and Tsunami walked into what appeared to be the dining room where everyone seated took notice of the two. Tsunami took her seat again and Naruto simply stood behind an empty seat with his hood hiding his face. Team 7 plus Tazuna were all staring at Naruto curiously, no doubt wondering who it was. Narumi noticed the handle of Twilight and the charm hanging from the grip. Narumi's hands flew over her mouth as she gasped at the same time Naruto pulled his hood off of his head. Kushina, Narumi, Naomi, and Kakashi all had wide eyes as they gazed at the different yet familiar face of Naruto. Sochi. Kushina cried out happily as unshed tears pooled in her eyes looking at her son who she had not seen in 5 years. She got up from her seat ready to hug her son but that was stopped by Naruto who held his hand up. Naruto's cold look got even colder when he looked at his so-called family. His frigid visage made Sakura, Tazuna, and Sasuke all shudder while those he was looking at froze in place. Kushina brought her hand up over her heart which suddenly started to clutch in pain. It felt like she was being stabbed by the blade on her son's back, it felt horrible. Do not even bother trying to attempt touching me because I will react violently to any non-allowed physical contact. Also I am not your son, Kushina, you lost that right long ago. Naruto said coolly as he stared at Kushina with eyes as cold as steel. Kushina felt like she would break down in tears right then and there. Naomi and Narumi were not in any better of a state. Sakura, Tsunami, and Tazuna looked between Naruto and the others, confusion evident on their respective faces. Sasuke was just sitting there silently thinking about the confrontation with the swordsman, not caring in the slightest about the drama before him. Kakashi looked at the namikaze uzumaki females and could see they were near their breaking point and hoped he could say something to stop this tense confrontation. Now Naruto, I am sure you don't mean that. After all, Kushina-sama is your mother and Naomi and Narumi are your sisters. Kakashi explained with a lazy drawl as he looked up from his Ika book right at the ravinette. He too was glad that his sensei's son had returned, but what he was saying was just not something you say to your mother. Naruto's cold azure eyes stared at the mask-wearing Jounin with cold indifference. It matters not. This is not the place to discuss personal matters, we are on a mission. However, do not tell me what I mean, Scarecrow. Naruto warned the smut-reading shinobi with a cool tone that made the man cringe ever so slightly. I have been briefed on the mission already, so tell me what your plan is. Naruto continued on a more neutral tone, getting over the irritation speaking with Kushina caused him. Naruto had not even bothered to sit down at the table, which could be seen as rude, but not to Naruto. No, he saw it as unnecessary. Kakashi closed the book once he saw Kushina staring at him murderously, and with a nervous chuckle he turned to face Naruto. I am going to work with Sasuke and Sakura in tree walking. Kakashi stated, simply getting curious glances from the two genin mentioned, wondering just what he meant. Naruto had to fight back a scoff when he heard Kakashi say that the pink-haired girl and the self-proclaimed great Uchiha had yet to master the simple tree-walking exercise. Just what had the academy and Kakashi been teaching these shinobi, and using that word was a stretch at best. Naruto turned his cool, penetrative gaze on his two sisters who had yet to say a word since he had arrived. Naomi and Narumi couldn't help but squirm under the brothers' chilling gaze, and what was worst, he wasn't even glaring, it was just a stare. Narumi initially thought that Naruto had forgiven them when she saw he had her gift, but that quickly changed when Naruto spoke to their mother. Naomi had hoped to speak to Naruto, but one look at her elder brother had stopped her dead in her tracks. Naruto turned his gaze to his jounin superior, Kushina, which let his sisters release the breath they were not aware they were holding. Kushina stared back at Naruto with a forlorn expression for an uncomfortable amount of time to everyone else besides the mother and son. Kushina, snapping out of her somber trance, looked at her daughters, then to her son, and smiles faintly. I am going to teach Narumi-chan and Naomi-chan how to stay on the water's surface even when it gets stormy. You're welcome to join us. Kushina offered hopefully, a hope shared by her two daughters who were all looking at the same person hopefully. Naruto looked at his family and was not surprised that they were further ahead than the other two. However, they were still behind him. I have no need for that training. I will watch the house. Naruto stated plainly and turned to leave the room when someone voiced their opinion. Even if you are the Hokage's son, you are still weak. That's why you act like you already know this stuff. Just so you can show off. Team 7's Uchiha stated ignorantly as he stared at Naruto's back with a smirk on his face. Naomi and Narumi were openly glaring at the Uchiha for insulting their brother like he just did. Sakura was glancing between the two worryingly because while she was Sasuke's #1 supporter, Naruto was the Hokage's son, and something about Naruto that made Sakura very nervous. Naruto slowly turned around to regard the Sasuke who was still smirking arrogantly at him. Then it happened, a quick flash of amusement invaded Naruto's usual cold, blue stare. Oh, is that so? Then perhaps I can beat you down, just like I did yesterday. Naruto suggested with his own smirk as he watched the Uchiha's face twist with agitation. Naruto was amused to see how easy it was to anger what he saw as a spoiled brat. He no doubt remembered how easily Naruto defeated him. Naruto thought that Sasuke was about to leap over the table and try again, but fortunately for Sasuke, Kakashi acted first this time and calmed him down. Naruto turned back around and left the house, jumping onto the roof and adopting a meditative stance as the other genin went out to perform their chakra control exercises. Kakashi had taken Sakura and Sasuke out to a forested area behind the house and stopped, allowing Sakura and Sasuke to inspect their training ground. There were very tall trees in front of them with no branches sprouting from the sides. They didn't have any more time to admire the trees because Kakashi had thrown a kunai in front of each of them. Kakashi, feeling their questioning looks, looked up from his smut and explained. Here is what you need to do to complete this exercise. Kakashi then slowly walked towards the tree, then without even breaking stride he walked straight up the tree and paused about halfway up the trunk. To complete this exercise you must apply the correct amount of chakra to the bottoms of your feet. Use those kunai to mark your progress. Kakashi dropped from the tree he glued himself to and walked over to a smaller tree behind Sasuke and Sakura to supervise their training. Sakura leaned down and picked up the ninja tool, looking at the tree with an unsure look. Sasuke snatched up his kunai and without a second thought rushed at the tree. Sasuke had taken a few steps up 3 before he was blown off the tree, but not before he slashed the bark. Sasuke got off of his back with a growl as he glared at the tree as if it was a living human who had just insulted him, a rather comical sight. That is what happens when you use too much chakra, Sasuke. Came Kakashi's lazy drawl, which Sasuke didn't even bother to respond to. Picking himself up, Sasuke attacked the tree once more, this time with Kakashi's advice in mind. Sasuke's momentum carried him past his original mark and Sasuke thought he would make it this time. That was when his feet slipped off the bark, and as he plummeted down he managed to cut the bark with the kunai before it was too late. And that is what happens when you do not put enough chakra under your feet. Again came Kakashi's advice, which held both a lecturing and amused tone, seeing the Uchiha fall on his head. Sasuke grunted as he righted himself and shot Sakura a glance, expecting her to be in a similar state. Sasuke's black eyes widened when he saw Sakura sitting on a rather high branch up near the foliage with her tongue sticking out and looking very proud of herself. Sasuke snarled to himself and tightened the grip on the handle of the kunai. He was not happy that Sakura was ahead of him, an Uchiha. That thought alone was just infuriating. How could he kill Itachi if he couldn't even beat the pink-haired kunoichi in tree climbing? He couldn't. Kakashi had a more logical perspective from his branch. No surprise in that one. Her folder said she was incredibly smart book-wise, so this simple of a theory wouldn't be too difficult for her to grasp. It also helps that she doesn't have the largest chakra reserves. She'd make a fine medic mean. Kakashi smiled looking at Sakura, who was trying to not let Sasuke catch her giggling at his falling on his face. Kakashi leaned back against the tree he was occupying with a tranquil smile. I should have passed a genin team long ago. This is pretty nice. Kakashi thought as he went back to reading his smut shamelessly as the two genin under his tutelage continued to work. Kushina, Naomi and Narumi had taken their training to a more suitable location down near the sea, each lost in their thoughts at the moment. The waves came and went with fluctuations in the lengths of their crests fitting of the geographic space named Nami no Kuni. The only objects providing a break in the constant waves were the supports that dove into the water holding up what had been built of the bridge. The three kunoichi had not even made it into the water, showing just how distracted they were from their son/brother's rather sudden reappearance in their lives. Narumi was the first of the three who was able to break away from the mental trance Naruto's appearance had put them in. Narumi, looking at her sister and mother, smiled sadly since it seemed that they were in similar states. Coughing loudly to get their attention, which it did, Narumi gave them each a small smile. Come on Naomi-chan, Kaa-san, the sooner that we get this training done the sooner we can speak with Naruto-kun, or try to at least. Narumi decided to keep the last part to herself, seeing the hopeful expressions on Kushina's and Naomi's faces so that she didn't crush their hopes. Naomi shot her sister a beaming smile, totally agreeing with her words and ready to finish their training. Naomi turned to face her smiling mother with fists clenched and eyes burning with determination. Kushina smiled, proud of both her daughters, Narumi for her words and Naomi for her determination. Kushina channeled some chakra to her feet and launched into the air with the chakra enhancing her jump. Landing on the crest of a wave, Kushina evenly distributed the chakra throughout the wave's falling motion, allowing her to stay stuck to the surface. Waiting for the wave to hit the bank, Kushina jumped back in between her two daughters. Now you have been taught that to stick to a calm surface you need to channel a consistent amount of chakra to your feet, however an active surface is another matter. If you try that while riding a wave you will be swallowed up by the wave. To stay atop a living wave you must apply different amounts of chakra to the soles of your feet, some places more concentrated, others not so much. Each wave is different than the last, and the only way to learn is through experience. So off you go. Kushina waved off her two students just as a large wave crashed down and created a light spray. Taking a few moments to appraise the waves rolling in towards them, the sisters looked at each other, nodded their heads and jumped onto the waves. They managed to balance themselves to the surface of the wave and for a few moments as the wave swelled down, but then the two kunoichi sunk into the wave. Kushina would have been surprised if they had managed to do it on the first try because of the difficulty of this exercise. Naomi and Narumi climbed back onto the surface and waited for the next wave to roll in. The quicker they got this done the sooner they could try to make amends. Naruto was sitting silently on the roof of the house with his eyes closed as his body set in a meditative position. He created a few shadow clones to observe the house while he meditated in the peace he was gifted. Naruto enjoyed meditation since it gave him reprieve from the daily burdens of shinobi life. He also learned that it helped fine-tune chakra control. It was these two things that had him thanking Mifune for forcing him to meditate. He could hear everything from the animals rustling through the woods to the waves crashing down on the shores. That was when his attention was pulled elsewhere, when he felt a small tug in his mind, curious as to why he allowed himself to be pulled into Waiting until the tugging sensation subsided, Naruto slowly opened his eyes and looked at his new surroundings. The first thing he noticed was that his feet were wet, but the first thing he saw were solid walls bathed in a faint orange light. Naruto arched his eyebrow as he looked around, taking note of the large pipes that were hanging overhead. Naruto had his suspicions to where he was, but knew of only one way to make sure he was right. With his goal in mind, Naruto began to wander in the only direction available to him, and that was forward. Naruto continued to walk into the endless darkness, but with each step more of the way was illuminated for him, but just the space around him. Naruto thought this to be his mindscape, which was a place in all living beings, yet only few utilized the space. People like Jinchuriki or even the Yamanaka, who used the mindscape as a base of operation when scanning the mind for information during interrogations. The strange thing was that Itachi and Naruto had tried to access the mindscape. Something prevented them from doing so, most likely the conscience of the Kyuubi. Finally, after an uncertain amount of time spent walking, Naruto found himself standing in the center of a large opening where all the pipes seemed to come to an end. In front of Naruto stood a line of thick steel bars that converged on a tag that had the kanji for seal on it. Naruto looked into the darkness behind the bars with his cool, blue eyes. Naruto continued waiting until a growl that rippled the water around his feet. The only effect the growl had on Naruto was that it blew his black hair back. Once the growl ended, a figure came from the shadows. Not to his surprise, Naruto was greeted by the sight of a large fox lying on his front paws, staring at him with red, slitted eyes. Naruto looked over the mass of large orange fur and took note of how the kitsune's torso was similar to that of a human, and he even had thumbs. The fox had large ears and what appeared to be whisker marks. Naruto knew this was the Kyuubi, but yet the being of chakra didn't have 9 tails, he had half of a single tail. Naruto simply stared at the legendary creature, not showing the slightest ounce of fear. My jailer graces me with his presence. So to what do I owe this honor? The Kyuubi's voice was deep like a baritone and reverberated off the walls, creating a dark echo. Naruto simply stared at the sarcastic Biju with an arched brow. Certainly this creature did not take him for a fool. Naruto narrowed his eyes and glared at the beast coldly. He didn't not like being thought of as a fool. The Kyuubi meanwhile was slightly surprised at the chilling gaze the human before him was displaying. By no means did it instill fear into him, but it was something to see that look in the eyes of a human. Do not play with me, Kyuubi, you will find out that I am not one for games. We both know that I do not hold any of your chakra and that you have been keeping me from entering this place. Naruto retorted, unafraid of the beast said to be able to create tsunamis with a simple flick of a tail, his voice holding the slightest amount of irritation. Kyuubi or not, Naruto would not be manipulated by anyone or anything. Naruto would answer his own calls at the times he saw fit to do so. The Kyuubi just growled darkly to the human's rather flippant response to him. The Kyuubi. That is right, I remember that night very well. Your father and mother took my chakra from me and sealed them into those 2 girls while leaving you with nothing but my conscience, quite the parental thing to do for their eldest son. The Kyuubi snarled, showing off his glowing white fang to Naruto, who stood there motionlessly, his eyes closed. The Kyuubi was mentally preparing himself for Naruto to lose his cool facade and scream at him. Naruto opened his eyes, revealing to the tailed beast his Sharingan blazing angrily at the beast. The Kyuubi's eyes burned with rage, remembering all the times he was hypnotized by those cursed eyes. You will never call that man or that woman my parents ever again, or there will be severe consequences. Do you understand me, Kyuubi? Naruto's voice was dark and dripping with animosity for the 2 people that the Kyuubi called his parents. Naruto did not care if this was the legendary 9 tails, he would not stand for such. Kyuubi decided he would avoid antagonizing Naruto on that matter any further, because with his lack of chakra he would no doubt be especially susceptible to a genjutsu. That didn't mean he would not continue to belittle and insult the human before his eyes. Finally you show those wretched eyes to me. Now take a few steps in so I can gouge out those eyes and crush them under my paw. The Kyuubi demanded of Naruto with an angry bellow that made the water splash up. Naruto brought his arms over his chest and crossed them, staring at the Kyuubi with an impassive Sharingan gaze that reminded the Kyuubi of Madara. If the Kyuubi had his tails, they would no doubt be swaying about angrily as he stared down at Naruto. Naruto of course did not listen to the Kyuubi's demand, not that he thought the Kyuubi could hurt him without his chakra. So you know of my Sharingan? I guess that would mean you would have looked into my memories. Naruto said more to himself than to the Kyuubi, who must have realized it since he didn't respond. Naruto let his red eyes drift to where he could see a half-orange, bushy tail resting on the floor, which gave him a question to be asked. Why are your tails missing? The question was blunt with no sign of an ulterior motive. The Kyuubi could not sense anything negative coming from the Sharingan wielder. Not greed, hatred, or even ambition. It was like looking into a void. The Kyuubi of course went through the memories of the young human and was impressed with what he viewed. Despite all of the rather cruel acts that the other humans had performed on him, Naruto had not blamed his presence for the human's actions. Naruto thought nothing of him. There was nothing negative nor positive. There was only respect for what he was capable of, nothing more. What the Kyuubi did uncover was that Naruto had no love for most of the village, his family included. The Kyuubi didn't respect Naruto, not by a long shot, but he would answer the question since the boy was able to see through the world's hatred towards him. Even someone like the Yondaime Hokage, who your people hail as a legend, cannot completely suppress me. Only a god or the sage could have done that. I can feel the chakra slowly resonating in my consciousness. I assume it is because of your proximity to the two sources of my chakra. The Kyuubi started with a prideful tone that faded to nothing more than an informative one by the end. The Kyuubi could only speculate as to what was happening since he had never had his yin and yang chakra sealed separately, let alone his consciousness in a third body. Naruto nodded his head, taking the explanation as fact since it did make sense that chakra as potent as the Kyuubi's would somehow find its way back. Naruto knew he would need help in the future, and what better ally than the Kyuubi. Now he wasn't foolish enough to believe the being of malice and destruction would trust him right away, but he could take a step in the right direction. I see, that makes sense. Is there anything I can do for you for answering my question? Naruto offered, but held his hand up when he saw the Kyuubi about to give his request. Aside from unsealing you, because then you'd fade without the correct amount of chakra to sustain yourself, that, and I am not sure how this seal works yet. The Kyuubi of course did not expect Naruto to be so logical when it came to his unsealing. He thought Naruto would have just yelled about how it would kill him. Showing nothing except the usual snarl, the Kyuubi stared at Naruto. I grow tired of going through your memories, and I'd like to see the outside world once more. If you tear off a piece of the tag, I will be able to see what you see, hear what you hear, and feel what you feel to an extent. It will also create a communication channel between us. The Kyuubi said while staring at the shinobi with discerning eyes, trying to pick up on emotions that weren't there. Naruto stared back into the red eyes of the Kyuubi with his own red eyes for what may have seemed like an eternity to anyone who wasn't the Kyuubi or Naruto. Naruto let his arms drop to his sides and took a few purposeful strides forward where a cyclone of water raised him up to the seal tag. Pinching his fingers around the top, left corner of the tag with a swift pull, he ripped off the edge. There was a brief flash of pain that made Naruto fall to the floor hunched over in pain. Naruto righted himself once the pain subsided, looking at the Kyuubi, his red eyes fading back to ice-cold blue. Naruto brushed the one bang hanging over his eye away, and it just fell back to its original position over his blue eye. Naruto felt a slight propelling in his mind and assumed that his time in the mindscape was coming to an end. Thank you for the knowledge, Kyuubi. I will be seeing you. Naruto waved over his shoulder as he retreated into the hallway he had come from, ignoring the Kyuubi's rather loud scoff. With his pseudo-container gone, the Kyuubi retreated back into the darkness and let himself be claimed by sleep once more, since the connection took a lot from him thanks to his lack of chakra. It had been 3 days since Naruto had opened up his senses to the Kyuubi, and he had yet to hear from his tenant. Naruto guessed he was simply taking a nap, since he seemed kind of lazy to the young shinobi. There had been a number of interesting moments that had happened over the last 3 days. One of those moments was when he was confronted by Team 7 seeking answers which he did not give them. Sasuke was not happy with Naruto's choice and tried to force the answers out of him, but Sasuke quickly found himself unconscious on the ground. The other incident he found amusing was when his so-called family tried to convince him to eat dinner with them. Naruto immediately declined and walked away from the group of people that gathered around the table. That was when Tsunami's brat Inari had come downstairs and so surely proclaimed that they knew nothing of misery and pain. Naruto was sick of listening to the spoiled brat and released a wave of potent killer intent to silence the child. With that, Naruto left the house and didn't return until everyone was sound asleep, since he didn't want to deal with conversation. Naruto was following behind Team 7 and Tazuna as they walked towards the bridge Tazuna was creating that happened to be the source of these problems. Kakashi had insisted that Naruto follow his orders and join the formation that he had come up with. Naruto refused, reminding him that his mission was to provide combat support while their mission was to protect the bridge builder. Kakashi had not bothered him with his foolish attempts to pull rank since that altercation. Naruto took note of how the mist started to thicken as they walked closer to the bridge. That was when there was a rush of information hit Naruto.
A shadow clone he left to guard the family, since it would be logical for someone to try something against Tazuna's family. Naruto's assumption proved to be true when 2 wannabe samurai cut through the front door of the home. Naruto's clone watched from behind the samurai as they threatened Inari and moved to take Tsunami hostage. That was when his clone struck, cutting the tan samurai's hand clean off, making the man howl in pain. The clone was feeling kind, so he retreated outside so that the woman and child would not be forced to watch 2 deaths. The samurai quickly followed him, and the clone used his Twilight and quickly drove the katana through the pale man's heart and removed the head of the tan man. Naruto burnt the 2 bodies before he went to check on his hostess and her son. Tsunami and Inari both thanked the clone and hugged him, and that was when the clone dispelled, leaving them alone. What is the meaning of this? Tazuna's gruff voice cried in shock, knocking Naruto out of his momentary introspection. Naruto watched indifferently as Tazuna kneeled down by one of the injured workers, who muttered something Naruto did not care to hear. Kakashi had revealed his Sharingan, and Kushina and readied herself as well. The untrained genin all started to look around nervously while Naruto calmly readied Twilight. Naruto knew this would be a good test of his swordsmanship. A duel with any of the ninja swordsmen of the Hidden Mist would be a good test to see how far he had come. Naruto and the rest of the Konoha nin watched as 4 figures came to in the mist. Arrogant fools. Naruto thought, seeing their intent for a head-on collision. Well, Sharingan no Kakashi, it seems you were off about my death. Those eyes can't read the future, but I can tell you your future. That future is a death at the end of my executioner's blade. A man with no eyebrows and his mouth covered in white bandaging stated, firmly pointing his huge blade at Kakashi. Naruto knew from the sword alone that this man was the demon of the Hidden Mist, Zabuza Momochi. Kakashi of course did not respond to the swordsman and just stared at the man. A second figure came out of the mist, standing to Zabuza's right. The man had blonde hair much like Narumi's hair, and his face was hidden by a Kirigakure hunter shinobi mask. The man was twirling a large needle menacingly, but everyone on the bridge knew that was no simple needle. This long sword was known as the Nuwabari, or the sewing needle. It was called such because of the thread in the base of the sword that was used to stitch together what the blade would pierce. Kushimaru was currently smirking as he stared at Kushina from behind his mask. I owe you for that punch you gave me last time, bitch. Kushimaru finished in a shrill laughing that made Kushina frown at the maniacal blonde swordsman. The next people to emerge were around Naruto's and the rest of the genin's age, 1 boy and the other a girl. The boy was at Naruto's height and had short blue hair and blue eyes placed behind a pair of glasses connected to ear protectors. He had blue pinstripes on his shirt and camouflage pants with a holster carrying a large blade. Naruto knew the blade, he made sure to know all famous blades. That sword was known as Hiramakari, often called a twin sword because of its shape. It had 2 indentations at the base creating a crossguard and was also extremely heavy. The hole and top of the blade would emanate the user's chakra, coating the blade, allowing the chakra to take any shape. The girl next to him did not draw any attention aside from the fact that she was in the full Kiri Hunter Nin suit. "Naruto, can you handle the boy with the blue hair?" Kakashi asked quietly, still staring at Zabuza, who was smirking behind his bandaging. Naruto did not reply. He was too busy eyeing the blue-haired boy who was squirming under Naruto's intense gaze. Kushina was about to repeat the question when suddenly there was a burst of air that blew from where Naruto was standing. Chojuro's eyes widened when he felt pain in his stomach and was launched to the far end of the bridge. No one was ready for Naruto's sudden burst of speed. Zabuza looked at Kakashi, his brow ridge raised as he looked at the Hatake. Kakashi looked over behind Zabuza's shoulder where Naruto and the blue-haired boy were before they were surrounded by the mist. Kakashi focused back in on his opponent, his Sharingan ready to trace any slight movements. "It doesn't matter who he is, Zabuza. All that matters is that he is your enemy," Kakashi replied tersely as he waited for his opponent to strike. Zabuza frowned at Kakashi's answer, clearly intrigued by the kid who managed to get so close to him so quickly. Zabuza wasn't too worried since he would have his fun with the brat after he dealt with the fabled Sharingan wielder. Kushina, who had to leap back to avoid having the new Abari so through her foot, turned her attention to her genin students. Seeing how on edge they were, she shot them a disarming smile. "You 4 protect the bridge builder, we will take care of these men." Kushina's voice, though comforting, was a firm order to her students. With her piece said, Kushina launched towards Kushimaru before the mist got too thick and hampered her vision. From within the mist there numerous occasions where metal contacting metal rang out. Kushina managed to stop a few of Kushimaru's forward jabs with the standard leaf tanto. Zabuza brought his executioner's blade down on Kakashi to cleave the leaf jounin in 2 pieces, but only found the ground of the bridge. "Haku!" Zabuza barked out as Kakashi tried to put space between him and Zabuza. Not a moment later the girl who was dressed as a Kiri Hunter Nin appeared beside the shinobi. "I want you to take care of those kids, then kill the bridge builder, do you understand?" The young kunoichi uttered a quick affirmative and shunshined to go do battle with the genin. Kakashi wanted to help his students, but Zabuza was having none of it as he used the reach of the large cleaver to his advantage. Kakashi could feel the bridge material splinter under the force behind Zabuza's attack, making the masked shinobi glad he evaded. Copying the chain of hand seals, Zabuza was going through. Both shinobi launched a dragon of water at each other. The dragons were evenly matched, and when they collided they soaked Zabuza and Kakashi. Rushing forward again, Zabuza charged in with his cleaver overhead and ready to strike. Fortunately, Kakashi struck first by stabbing Zabuza in the heart just before the giant sword contacted his shoulder. Zabuza turned into a puddle of water upon being stabbed by Kakashi's kunai. A water clone? Kushina too was having a difficult time with the blonde swordsman from the village hidden in the mist. Kushina was trying to land a punch to the thin shinobi using her super strength that she learned from Tsunade, though not quite at the Sanin's level. However, Kushimaru was excellent at avoiding strikes, something he needed to be able to do since his weapon provided little defense. Kushina looked to the truly evil shinobi's hands and found them empty. However, she could not think on this development because there was something digging into her shins. Looking down, the female Uzumaki spotted a shimmer break the veil of mist that surrounded the 2 ninja. Chodo Ninpo, Earth Spider Sewing. Kushina created a shadow clone and had it throw her into the air, avoiding having her knees being removed from her shins. Kushina watched as Kushimaru pulled on the thread and returned the needle to his grip for his next attack. Kushina dropped down but landed on top of the thin threads that Kushimaru spread throughout the space. "Man, I haven't been out in the field in so long. It is a good thing that I had Minato help me with my wind ninjutsu." Kushina went through her hand seals at a very impressive pace for one who had not been on active duty for some time. Wind release, great breakthrough. Kushina's jutsu slammed into the blonde-haired swordsman and knocked him back, but also cleared up the battlefield, effectively dispersing the mist. Kakashi joined back up with Kushina, both of which were slightly winded for different reasons. Zabuza and Kushimaru also took this time to regroup with each other. Zabuza had cuts on his arms and across his torso from a few close exchanges with Kakashi's kunai. Kushimaru's mask was chipped at the jawline, revealing the man's angular chin. The wind jutsu Kushina had used had blown some thread that was loose up and cut Kushimaru. The battle had taken its toll on each combatant. Kushina, seeing a new opponent, charged at the eyebrow-deficient shinobi with her fist reared back to strike. Zabuza was questioning the sanity of the red-haired woman until something told him to block the punch. Trusting his instinct, the Kiri shinobi flipped his blade and blocked Kushina's chakra-enhanced strike with the flat side of his executioner's blade. Zabuza felt the impact being absorbed by his forearms and felt that his blade would crack when it started to show small spiderweb-like cracks. However, the blade was crafted well enough to avoid from being shattered, but another few strikes like that would surely destroy the blade. That was just ridiculous. If I let the blade take any more hits like that one, I won't be able to fix the blade with blood. That only works when there is a piece of the weapon connected to the handle. Pieces on the ground just won't do. Zabuza ranted in his mind as he grunted, swinging his blade at Kushina, forcing her to retreat momentarily. Creating 3 Nizu Bunshin, Zabuza gave them silent orders to attack Kushina in a triangular formation. Zabuza watched on as his 3 water clones each converged on Kushina simultaneously, with their replicas of the executioner's blade rose overhead and ready to strike. Water release, spinning water. Just before the Zabuza clones could carve into her flesh, Kushina began to spin in a clockwise motion with her hand open. Not a moment later, small specks of water spun with her, steadily growing until the water formed a dome that was spinning and compact. The water quickly swallowed up the clones and the would-be assault. The water continued to rotate violently until it dispersed, revealing a glaring Kushina. Thank goodness that Hitomi-chan taught me the basic principles of the kaiten before she passed on. Kushina thought with a sense of relief as she pulled a few kunai from the holster on her thigh and coated them with water. Chodo ninpo, falling threads. Kakashi watched as the black wire-like thread from the nuwabari fell towards him with great speed while covering a great area. Kakashi went through signs with his hands, and suddenly a small concentrated ball of fire spewed out from under his mask and at the incoming threading. Unfortunately, the ball of fire could not burn through the chakra-enhanced thread, which led to the scarecrow shinobi being sliced by the wires. Kushimaru let out a high-pitched giggle, seeing the shocked look in the eyes of the Sharingan shinobi. Kushimaru's celebrating was cut short as he received a strong shock. Surprised, Kushimaru looked to see an electrical current traveling down the metal thread, showing that Kakashi was actually a lightning clone. A Raitun Kage Bunshin. Kushimaru thought in surprise and clenched teeth, the electrical current affecting his slender body. The strong current was making each of his muscles contract, temporarily paralyzing the blonde shinobi. Kakashi, who was sticking to the underside of the bridge until his clone was destroyed. Kakashi, not wanting to waste any time, gripped his wrist and started forming his personal assassination jutsu, the lightning bolt cutter, Raikiri. Walking up to the immobile man, Kakashi brought his arm back and thrusted the lightning bolt cutter forward towards the man's heart. Just before Kakashi could kill the shinobi, Kakashi had to leap back as the nuwabari cut just under his Sharingan eye. Kakashi wiped the blood from under his eye as he looked at Kushimaru, who was giggling like a crazy man. Kakashi saw a thread tied around his wrist and that the sewing needle was coming out of the bridge. Kakashi pieced together that he must have grounded the current and thus was allowed to move. Kakashi felt another presence appear next to him to see a slightly bleeding and winded Kushina. Zabuza joined Kushimaru, repairing his blade with his own blood as Kushimaru cut the thread around his wrist with the nuwabari. The battle had taken its toll on each of the jounin. The 4 jounin-level shinobi each looked over at the dome of ice mirrors with different expressions. Narumi, Naomi and Sasuke were each looking at a different mirror of ice, but the sight was the same, a girl dressed as a hunter nin. The Leaf Genin could not keep up with the speed Haku showcased by transferring mirrors. Each of the Leaf Shinobi tried to hit the Kiri Hayaton user with their ninja tools with no success. They decided to leave Sakura out to protect Azuna since she couldn't provide much in the way of help. Naomi tried to make a break to escape the dome of mirrors so she could attack from the outside of the structure. Haku quickly transported to the mirror closest to Naomi and punched the fellow kunoichi in the gut before tossing her back to the other genin of Team 7. There is no escape, Konoha Shinobi. I do not wish to kill you, so I request that you hand over the bridge builder and you will leave with your lives. The feminine voice seemed to come from each direction, only making the threat all the more real. Sasuke was mentally questioning how this girl was stronger than he was, he and Uchiha. He silently wondered how things would change if he had awakened his Sharingan. Narumi and Naomi were wondering if they could destroy the mirrors and break through the dome. The three genin shared the same thought unknowingly and acted simultaneously, facing opposite directions. Fire release, Grand Fireball. Water release, Water Javelin. Wind release, Dancing Blades. In came the shouts of Sasuke, Narumi, and Naomi as they launched off their respective jutsu, hoping to eliminate one of the mirrors trapping them. Sasuke's fireball merely melted the corners of the mirror he targeted. Narumi's javelin, consisting of water, buried itself into the mirror across from her, but instead of the mirror shattering, the javelin fell apart. The 10 wind blades cut the mirror Naomi targeted, but the cuts were just superficial. The Konoha genin could not believe that the damage was minimal at best. More so Sasuke, since his jutsu was to have melted the creation of ice. Those levels of attacks will not break my ice. I am sorry that I have to do this, but it is my mission and I can't fail, Zabuza-sama. Haku released a pulse of chakra into her technique, spreading it to the mirrors. The chakra given to each mirror instantly repaired the damage, leaving the mirrors appearing as if they were brand new. Haku went to the mirror positioned above the Leaf Genin's heads and pulled out 10 Senbon needles, coating them in ice. Crossing her arms over her chest, holding a needle between each knuckle, took aim at the clueless Team 7. Hey Imo, I need you to provide the fire and I will use my wind to power it up. Got it? Naomi demanded of the Uchiha, glaring at one of the many reflections of Haku. Sasuke grunted, slightly annoyed by the emo remark, but decided it was best to focus on the threat before his eyes. Sasuke nodded and moved next to Naomi as Narumi stood behind the two, waiting for their collaboration attack to start. Haku, who was overhead, had no intentions to let this happen because a wind-enhanced fire jutsu would surely melt one of her mirrors. Hayaton, Ice Needles of Death. The 10 needles were quickly launched at the genin from above, and before they could react, more frozen sunbon were launched at them from the left. Turning to the left, Sasuke, Narumi and Naomi were assaulted by more frozen needles from behind. This continued for the following minutes. The 3 genin were bleeding from cuts on their arms and legs, with more needles sticking from them like a pincushion. It was thanks to the Kyuubi chakra that Narumi and Naomi were still conscious. However, Sasuke was not as lucky. Just when it seemed that the namikaze uzumaki girls were about to defeat it, a large explosion drew the attention of all on the bridge. Prior to the explosion, "You're good." That was the simple statement Naruto used as he locked his blade, Twilight, against Chojuro's much larger Hiramakari. Both teens were sweating lightly since their battle up to this point was nothing but a duel of swords. Chojuro was in worst condition, however, due to the effort it took to wield the Hiramakari. Both swordsmen had small lacerations marking their clothing, but only a few of the cuts actually drew blood. Naruto eased up on his blade, causing the unsuspecting Kiri shinobi to stumble forward, leaving him open. Naruto took advantage and lashed out with a powerful kick to the gut. Chojuro tumbled to the ground from the force of the kick. Naruto stood there silently, waiting for Chojuro to stand up, since he had no desire to kill someone who could test his skills in the future. Thanks, you are pretty skilled yourself, Shinobi-san," Chojuro replied, wiping some blood that was dripping from the corner of his mouth. Chojuro's blade flared to life with chakra as he swung the blade at Naruto, who didn't have time to avoid it and had to stop it with Twilight. The blue glow from the Hiramakari was only inches from the bang of black hair over Naruto's eye and inching closer. Soon the force was too much for Naruto to take and Naruto was launched backwards into a railing. Groaning, Naruto shook the feelings back into his arm and shakily readied himself once more. He is incredible. He has managed to keep up with me to this point in swordsmanship, and I am one of the 7 swordsmen of the Hidden Mist. Can I win? Just when it seemed as if the blue-haired boy's confidence was going to falter, an image of a beautiful woman with red hair and a charming smile filled his mind. With his resolve strengthened, Chojuro lifted his blade up again and tried cutting Naruto down, missing by the narrowest of margins, cutting through the rail. Naruto, sensing his opponent become more confident through his concise actions, moved back to the center of bridge, behind the other battles. He has gotten a lot more aggressive and energetic. What happened? Naruto asked himself, avoiding sword strikes from Chojuro backpedaling. Naruto suddenly saw Chojuro preparing something and quickly tensed himself. Soto Ninpo, Hiramakari Hammer. Naruto watched as Chojuro's blade changed from a twinsword into a bulkier, much wider shape to fit what Chojuro was trying to do. The chakra started off as a light blue and constantly grew and grew until the chakra became dense and heavy. It was clear that holding that much chakra was physically taxing as the sweat poured from Chojuro's forehead. Chojuro, with a war cry, swung his sword down, propelling the thick wall of chakra down on his black-haired opponent. The sight of a huge wave of chakra would have unnerved any genin. Fortunately, Naruto was already preparing for something along those lines. Kami no Ken no Mai, crossing dimensions. Naruto, who was preparing his move ever since Chojuro's blade had started to change its shape to what it was currently, Naruto acted quickly by slashing the air twice. The first time the slash left an arc of red energy floating in front of Naruto, the second slash left an arc of clear energy. The first slash felt incredibly hot as it started to compact itself into an orb, as the second slash did the same with a light humming. This technique used Naruto's elemental chakra and compacted them, making their destructive qualities much more concentrated. The white orb and the fiery red orb slammed into the chakra wall, and the result was instantaneous. Boom! The wind orb compressed and created a small vacuum sphere, and the fiery red orb and combustion to the attack. Chojuro's wall of energy was also very volatile, so the result was rather impressive, a small blast of fire which no one on the bridge saw. Each battle on the bridge came to an end, and they all stared at the large cloud of smoke surrounding the point of contact. Everyone stood silent as they waited to see who would step out of the smoke, if anyone did. It took a few tense minutes for the smoke to clear away and reveal Naruto and Chojuro to the others. Both were on one knee, using their respective blades to keep them up. Both boys' clothes were burned in various places from their proximity to the explosion. No one moved or said a word, then a sound broke the eerie silence. Clapping.
Well, that's it for the video. Comment ramen if you made it this far. A new part will be made shortly. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.